Spellcaster is one of the best types in Yu-Gi-Oh! And this was still true back in the early days, to the point where we can have yet another top 10 about the best monsters from that type. So join us as we go over 10 more amazing spellcasters from the classic era of Yu-Gi-Oh! And starting off at number 10, we have Lord of D. This is a level 4 dark spellcaster with 1200 attack, 1100 defense, that, while on the field, makes it so dragon-type monsters cannot be targeted by card effects. Lord of D might not have the best stats or even the best effect for its time, to the point where the localization team didn't think it was worth the ink to spell out dragon instead of D. But it is one of the first few effect monsters to see play. This was largely because of what it enabled and not because of what it actually did though. While having Lord of D on the field would prevent your Blue Eyes White Dragon from getting hit with a Trap Hole or a Soul Exchange, its main purpose was to allow the Flute of Summoning Dragon to be played, a card which special summons up to 2 dragons from your hand. This was the original way to summon Blue Eyes White Dragon before it had a proper archetype with dedicated support, and is a viable strategy in the oldest format for the TCG, Yugi Kaiba. The card wouldn't really see play afterwards though, but Lord of D and its flute would go on to inspire numerous retrains throughout the years, many of which also saw some play. Though it is kind of a footnote in history, that is more than enough to earn its number 10 spot on this list. And at number 9, we have Gemini Elf, a level 4 Earth spellcaster with 1900 attack and 900 defense. While there is literally nothing we can say about Gemini Elf's effect, it was once seen as one of the biggest offenders of power creep in Yu-Gi-Oh! When the game first came to the West, 1800 was the best you can get on a normal summoned monster that didn't require tributes, but you were so pressed for options that even 1700 attack beaters were still around and seen play. This barrier was first broken with Mechanical Chaser, but since it was quite difficult to acquire as a tournament pack exclusive, this small 50 attack difference could cost you triple digits. For better or for worse, Gemini Elf would be the one to break this barrier a few months later, being much easier to acquire but certainly not a budget option, since even though it was in a main set, it was only available at the highest rarity. This monster saw play at max copies in basically every single deck back then, though there were other beaters around that could get either bigger or had actual good effects. We wouldn't see the 1900 attack barrier be broken until much later with Gene Warped Warwolf, though by that point we had so many better effect monsters running around that it was unthinkable to have a vanilla monster in your deck anymore. Still, just like many others on this list, it's one of the cards that first spring to mind when hearing someone say classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Out loud. And at number 8, we have Crystal Seer. This is a level 1 water spellcaster flip monster that, when flip face up, lets you look at the top 2 cards of your deck. You add one to your hand and place the other on the bottom of your deck. Now, there was a lot of hype for Crystal Seer when it was first announced back in the day. There had already been a low-level flip monster that wreaked havoc on the meta before in Magician of Faith, and though she was still around at Seer's release, she had been limited for quite a while. While Crystal Seer can't recycle any power spells, being able to dig 2 cards deep into your deck could help you get to the bomb of cards that you wanted instead. This was also a time where Monarchs were extremely good, and there's nothing better than resolving a flip effect that draws you a card, and then using the now useless body for a tribute summon. It had so much going for it, but it just so happened that this was one of the first cards to not live up to expectations. Monarchs were not starved for tribute fodder, as Treeborn Frog was already a thing, and they also already had a really strong Destiny Hero engine with the pre-errata version of Destiny Hero Disc Commander running around, allowing for way more pluses without having to rely on flips. There wasn't even any breathing room, as just one set after Crystal Seer's release, we would see the release of Dark Arm Dragon, a new tiered 0 card that felt like a breaking point for the speed of the game. And so that meta where Crystal Seer would have been really good just never came to be. And at number 7, we have Apprentice Magician. This is a level 2 dark spellcaster that on summon lets you place 1 spell counter on a face-up card that you can place a spell counter on. Also, if it's destroyed by battle, you can special summon a level 2 or lower spellcaster monster from your deck in face-down defense position. Apprentice Magician may look pretty modest, but it was actually an amazing recruiter for its time, and probably one of the first type-specific payoffs in the game, rewarding you for building a deck with more spellcasters than you would otherwise. While it can float into another copy of itself to wall off your opponent, just as most other recruiters can, its most important trait is that it summons monsters in face-down defense position, which lets you use flip effects unlike most other versions of this effect. This let Apprentice be its own little engine that could get you either more copies of itself, Magician of Faith to recover spells, or Old Vindictive Magician for a pop. This let it be the backbone of some old Monarch strategies, as sticky monsters that you can just tribute off later were perfect to have as fodder. Apprentice was also probably a big reason why Crystal Seer was so hyped as it was, since it represented yet another target for it, though in the end the two only saw play together a couple of times. Apprentice's bonus effect of placing a spell counter was also something that could come up at the time with Breaker the Magical Warrior. It was strong enough to be limited back then, so being able to get its effect off twice was something that could change the tides of the duel for sure. And at number 6, we have Exodia the Forbidden One. As everyone knows, this card grants you an automatic win in the duel if you have it, along with right arm of the Forbidden One, left arm of the Forbidden One, right leg of the Forbidden One, and left leg of the Forbidden One in your hand. Formalities aside, everyone knows what Exodia does. It's a card so iconic in both the game and the anime that anyone who's the slightest bit into TCGs is sure to know what an Exodia strategy is. Competitively, this was never the most popular or best deck you could play, even if it was available from the beginning. The sole exception to this was in some really early OCG metas, where not only did you have 3 of every piece available, but also the pre-errata versions of Sangan and Witch of the Black Forest, meaning that they would search for more pieces when sent to the graveyard. Even then, this wasn't the de facto best strategy, since deck destruction decks were still around as well. While it is a very interesting and flavorful way to build a deck, Exodia is generally outclassed for a few reasons. Back then, winning with Exodia meant you generally had to build a stall deck to survive long enough to draw into everything. While there were some pretty good stall cards around, it was often way better to build for a burn or deck out win condition instead, as you didn't have to run any useless bricks and wouldn't instantly lose to most hand disruption. Nowadays, as the average duel only takes a few turns, the only way to build it is to have a deck that can search all 5 pieces in one turn. While that is certainly possible with cards like Blue Dragon Summoner, if your deck is doing that much searching and comboing uninterrupted, odds are you'd be winning the game no matter what you played. You're better off just playing a regular combo deck, which is going to have way more space for defensive cards too. Still, there have been some good Exodia decks throughout the years, and this card is so beloved it really could not be missed in any list talking about the best spellcasters from back then. And at number 5, we have Royal Magical Library, a level 4 light spellcaster with 0 attack and 2000 defense. Each time a spell card is activated, this card gets 1 spell counter, which you can have a maximum of 3 at a time. Also, you can remove 3 spell counters from this card to draw 1 card. Now, Exodia might have been the first, but if we're talking about the best spellcasters at helping you with an alternate win condition, it would certainly have to be Royal Magical Library. Getting an extra draw every 3 spell activations might not sound like much, but when you build a deck that's almost only spells that draw more cards, it gives you just enough of a boost to go through the entire thing in one turn. The oldest application for this was in Library FTK, named after this very card. It used some very strange looking cards such as Convulsion of Nature combined with Archfiend's Oath as a draw engine, along with some very strong and now banned powerful spells to go through your entire deck while also depleting your life points. When you were low enough, Reversal Quiz lets you exchange life totals with your opponent, and if you send a black pendant for its cost, it'll straight up kill them once all that resolves. Royal Magical Library also saw some play to help Monarch FTK, and even saw some experimentation as a good normal summon in some pendulum decks too. Though its effect sounds like it would fit like a glove in modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, cards like Drone Lockbird and Infinite Impermanence make sure that no deck can consistently pull off a similar strategy without getting stopped most of the time. And at number 4, we have Injection Fairy Lily. This is a level 3 Earth spellcaster with 400 attack and 1500 defense. During damage calculation, if this card battles, you can pay 2000 life points to have it gain 3000 attack during damage calculation. Injection Fairy Lily is one of those cards that you've probably seen and played with but don't remember is even a spellcaster, especially since it has the word fairy in its name. This was one of the most aggressive monsters of its time, so much so that it actually stayed on the ban list for several years. In an era where a 1900 attack beater was amazing by itself, and a card that could get a bit stronger than that with a little bit of setup was enough to have an entire deck built around it, Lily kind of outclassed them both by being normal summonable as a 3400 attack beater. Sure, it does require 2,000 life points each time you want to activate its effect, so you can't do it more than a few times each match. But being able to remove a key threat or just pressure your opponent massively more than makes up for it. The fact that the attack boost triggers specifically during the damage step makes it way harder for your opponent to punish it too, since most cards that could stop her needed to be activated way before you could ever reach that point. The only card that can actually respond to this sort of effect well is Honest, but that wouldn't be printed until quite a bit after Fairy Lily fell off naturally. And at number 3, we have Fog King. This is a level 7 water spellcaster with an original attack and defense of 0. You can normal summon this card with 1 or no tributes, and its attack becomes the combined original attack of any monsters tributed for its summon. Last but not least, as long as this card remains face up on the field, neither player can tribute cards. Now, Fog King may look a bit out of place on this list, but it is an old spellcaster that ended up seeing a ton of play, just not in the era the card was released in. While Monarchs were a thing even back then, Mask of Restrict used to be the anti-tribute card of choice. It wasn't until Monarchs became a proper archetype later that this card would become massively better overnight. Even if its stats would be literally nothing if you didn't tribute for it, a floodgate you could just normal summon for free was more than welcome, especially since you could just drop it to stop a Monarch's deck's interactions, like Ether the Heavenly Monarch, even when going second. However, where this card really shone was in the mirror match. It does stop both players from tributing once it's on the field, but if you manage to summon it with decent enough stats by tributing over your other Monarchs, it can win the game single-handedly anyway. Though it isn't a Monarch itself, the protection from March of the Monarchs makes it pretty much unremovable. And the attack boost from Domain of the True Monarchs isn't bad either. If it wasn't for the next card on this list, this would be the classic spellcaster to strike the most fear in any modern player's mind. And finally at number 2, we have Jowgen the Spiritualist, a level 3 light spellcaster with 200 attack and 1300 defense. You can discard one random card from your hand to destroy all special summon monsters on the field. And as long as this card remains face up on the field, neither player can special summon monsters. Anyone can tell why Jowgen is good at first glance. It's a full stop for any and all kinds of special summons. This is an effect that's aged like fine wine though throughout the years, with many classic cards that did the same thing getting banned, and Jowgen is no exception. What is notable about Jowgen is that it has no inherent special summon restrictions itself, unlike, say, Vanity's Fiend. So it's a floodgate you could often tutor from your deck instead of needing to use your normal summon on it. This was relevant first with spellbooks due to their Spellbook of Judgment, which not only could add a lot of cards to your hand during the end phase, but could also cheat out a copy of Jowgen from your deck as long as you played at least 3 spell cards during your turn. While its stats do mean that pretty much any normal summon can beat over it, it was also pretty much always protected by Spellbook of Fate. This all got addressed with the banning of Judgment at the time, but this card would still go on to be relevant many years later. It eventually became increasingly easy to search and summon, either through the White Forest cards or branded cards. Though it was never the top of the meta, it ended up getting hit on the ban list so it wouldn't be used as a replacement for the other Premier Lock card, Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, where it resides to this day, hopefully to never return. And lastly at number 1, we have Lumina Lightsworn Summoner. This is a level 3 light spellcaster with 1000 attack and 1000 defense. Once per turn, you can discard one card to target and special summon a level 4 lower Lightsworn monster from your graveyard. And during each of your end phases, you send the top 3 cards of your deck to the grave. Once upon a time, Lightsworns wreaked havoc on the Yu-Gi-Oh metagame. Coming from the very tail end of what could be considered classic Yu-Gi-Oh, they perfectly represented the shift the game took from being mostly good stuff piles with some loose theming to being a game dominated by archetypes. While some cards relied on graveyard synergies before, this was the first full deck to be built around it, with many powerful effects that could trigger randomly just from monsters being milled. The scariest parts of this deck were Honest, not even a Lightsworn monster, but one of the first truly terrifying hand traps that could get you killed out of nowhere, and Judgment Dragon, the ultimate payoff for milling so much, which could summon itself, blow up the field, and hit for 3000 with just a bit of setup. However, Lumina did so much of the heavy lifting in making these two scary, and she was even limited when Lightsworn had just come out. Her effect allows you to set up a very easy mill of 6 cards by reboarding another Lightsworn, and it could even recoup card advantage if that Lightsworn is Gareth, Lightsworn Warrior. If Lumina is allowed to live on the field for a turn, it's pretty much game over, since you can reborn yet another Lightsworn and swing for a heavy chunk of your opponent's life points while almost guaranteeing Judgment Dragon is live. Though removing a 1000 attack monster might sound easy in theory, that's where Honest came in. If they had it in hand, you'd be wasting your battle phase and taking some extra damage for your troubles if you were to try. A discard 1 to reborn effect would look quaint in today's Yu-Gi-Oh! But it was certainly one of the power creep pioneers that pushed the game into what it is today. Lumina might not really see any play anymore, but historically she is for sure one of the best spellcasters the game has ever produced, and certainly one of the best on this list.